Our next speaker is Andrew Petrosoniak. Andrew is an ED physician at St Michael's Hospital in Toronto and assistant professor at the University of Toronto. Andrew has been involved for some time now about the redesign of clinical spaces using simulation. And again, I think COVID has added a new dimension to that. So thanks very much, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for putting this amazing group of individuals together and inviting me to be alongside. I'm going to talk a little bit about simulation-informed clinical design. We'll dig into a little bit of usability testing, and then hopefully I'll provide a case example along the way. I do have a disclosure. I am a co-founder and I run a company called Advanced Performance Healthcare Design. We do run simulation to help support the design of hospital infrastructure, but none of the content that I'll be talking about here is related to the company. I think this hopefully or unfortunately resonates with many of us working in healthcare. Every policy works great on paper. And this is exactly what happens with many of the policies, and I certainly won't exclude myself from this. I've been around boardroom tables devising the greatest policies you might imagine that work exactly as intended around a boardroom table, except policies aren't intended to inform boardrooms. They're intended to form those of us at the bedside and those of us providing clinical care. And so it's exactly this that becomes the challenge, is this transition. And some industries have gotten it a little bit more right than we have, where they take ideas, they then move along with prototypes, and they have wonderful outputs. Whereas in medicine, I think sometimes we miss that gap is missed a little bit, in that bridge between our blueprint to the end state sometimes isn't quite as finessed, and it's there that we have opportunity. And not too long ago, I don't know that I can remember a pre-COVID era, but apparently it existed. We all encountered this turn of events in March, February, depending on where we were in the world. And with this advent of COVID now being so disruptive to our lives and disruptive to the healthcare that we provide, we're now faced with a whole new set of challenges and a whole new set of human factors, elements, and issues that arise as we try and deliver healthcare. And in the past, we would sit down and put together policies and then roll them out, and then we would get feedback a year or two later and see how they go and attend M&M rounds. And in the words of Michael Ryan, who really from the WHO and has outlined what we need during COVID, speed trumps perfection. And this is something that we need to adjust how we approach challenges in a COVID era. And so with that, we need to look towards high return on investment aspects. Where can we optimize our efforts so that when we're stressed, when we're challenged, when we have limited time, how can we get the biggest return on investment for our efforts? And so I think I want to show this curve. This is called the Mclean Curve that some of you might be familiar with. But what we're looking at here is a curve that was developed out of the architecture community. But what it highlights is where there's pretty solid return on investment when we think about design of new content and new elements. So if we look on the black line, it shows the ability of designs to impact a project and the ability of effort to impact a project. And we can see that if we put a lot of effort early on, we can have a substantial impact on the project, and that diminishes over time. And the inverse of that is the cost of the designs. Early on costs less, but as we design spaces further and further, and we get closer to operational state, then the cost of changing designs becomes that much higher. And so if we can think about how we might adjust our innovation, adjust our design strategies, then we can get a better return on investment. And so if we look at this, if we can be in this area where it says innovative design in the blue curve, then we're going to get that greater return. And we can really focus on high value assets. And so if you're trying to build a hospital, it's far cheaper to move doors on a blueprint than it is to move doors once the hospital's fully constructed. And so what we try to do by bringing simulation and usability testing to the forefront, particularly during COVID, is we have limited resources. Let's look and see where we can make the biggest bang for your buck. And so these are the things that face us all the time. When we're trying to look at returns on investment, we're looking at meeting costs. Time of people at meetings is often discounted, but it's not just money, it's the time and effort that people take to be in the meetings and then the follow-up required. There's obviously, if we don't have processes in place, we have inefficient time use. If we have poor design, we result with adverse events and ultimately unintended outcomes and consequences. So what I want to do is I want to dig into kind of 3 principles that we can use here to help support how we might think about design, particularly in COVID. And I'd like to go through each one and kind of give you an example, and then we're going to move into a case example. And so the first is form fits function, and many of you are probably familiar with that term. And this is the idea that while we might have something beautiful, a product that looks great, it has to still meet the function that it's intended for. So if it's just like you could have the most beautiful square wheel, but a square wheel will not get you very far in your day-to-day commute if you put that on your car. And so the form must fit the function. The next principle that is discussed in design is the fail fast and fail often. And this does not mean that we're looking for failure and that if we achieve failure, we must go hide in the corner and cry. But rather, we expect failure, and failure is just an opportunity to learn and to revise. And finally, this idea of test, test, test. This is once we get to the end state, that we're satisfied with our product, that we test it, we have measurable outcomes, and that we have a process in place to evaluate how those are functioning. This is a great quote that I think really exemplifies the importance of design. The environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. This is by the author James Clear. And this really highlights the importance that form must fit function. And this is so frequent that we have in our minds that we're going to go towards the flag, we're going towards our objective. This is what we have in our mind, and yet we forget to design for the fact that our bike isn't very good going through water, or going across a ladder, or going down a big hill and through a storm. So the form must fit function, and then once we've established that, we've come up with a good design, we still can't expect that it will be perfect. And remember back what Mike Ryan said, he said speed trumps perfection during COVID. And that's exactly what we need. We need to be able to roll things out quickly and then move along. And so this strategy here, you can see we design, we prototype, we evaluate. It's not perfect, we continue that process, and it's iterative the entire time. And finally, once we get to the end state, whatever that might be and however we might define that, we can crash test the system in its native environment to ensure that it works as intended, and we gather data. None of you would get into a car, none of you would be allowed into a car that had not been crash tested. So why do we allow patients to move into spaces that have not been crash tested? Why do we allow patients to become the first test of their own clinical space? And so what we can do by getting a better design, we can use a strategy called usability testing, and this links users, designers, and experts. And at the core, at the center of this Venn diagram is engagement, and that's absolutely critical. Now, I want to walk you through a case study about how we used usability testing at the beginning of COVID. And so it's March 13th, Friday the 13th, which it is actually for you guys in Australia right now, I believe. March 12th here right now. But March 13th, Friday the 13th, 2020, COVID is just taking hold in North America. And we've been assigned to build COVID assessment centers so that people can get rapidly tested. March break's just been canceled. We had a whole team of physicians and nurses who were in charge of putting together the designs of the COVID assessment center. Colleagues of mine, Dr. Lockwood, Dr. Doss, and their team put together on the back of a napkin what they anticipated how this would roll out. But what they asked from us at the simulation center is, how can we make sure that the form that we came up with fits the function that is needed? And so what we did was we rolled out quite robust usability testing over the course of 48 hours with the goal of launching from Friday, taking over a non-clinical space, which was an atrium usually used for wine and cheeses, to become our COVID assessment center that is still functioning today and seeing several hundred patients a day. And you can see we started with tape. We started very basic, but we needed to understand how people move within the space. And we just started moving objects in so that we could get people to understand how that space would work. And you can see here how it started, to borrow from the internet that is common right now, the internet memes out there, how it started and how it's going. And you can see the principles are still there, but it's changed a little bit. And in case you're wondering, that is me. I tested negative. And you can see here, this is one of the examples of what we call a pluralistic walkthrough. And this is really critical because what we did here is you can see the person at the window, and she's checking in with our registration clerk. And what we're having people watch from all aspects. So we have our infection prevention and control team. We're having the heads of the COVID assessment center. We're having our nurse practitioners, our other physicians, our registration team, and they're watching this person move through the space. And what this allows us to do is truly understand how the people will interact with the space, so that IPAC doesn't say, oh, well, our policy says we can do this. Now they can truly understand why a person might behave in a particular way, and they're more likely to relax certain measures or focus on high value assets. And so what this allowed us to do, for instance, when we were trying to take our health card, which needs to be used to transmit the information to even register, we were able to quickly see the challenges. At the time, we thought that COVID might be transmitted by touching, a health card. And we've since learned, but the point is that at the time, that's all we knew. And so we had to have a strategy that would allow us to see the challenges that an individual might face when they're holding their health card up to the glass, when they're trying to pass the health card underneath the glass, and how we could overcome those challenges while meeting IPAC's recommendations. And so what we're using, by using these different usability testing techniques, we're blending and linking policy with human behavior, and it's absolutely critical to get a successful design. And you can see here, now this is the end product, or one along the way, nearly the end product, and it's fully functional. We used a stepwise approach that includes think aloud usability testing, where people would walk through, look around what they're seeing, tell us where they're confused. We then stepped up to pluralistic walkthroughs with our entire design team so that they could observe this. And finally, we tested it. So what this allowed us to do, 3 key points, is we were able to mitigate confusion points, evaluate real-world implementation, and identify unintended consequences. This was the engagement of having an entire team together was absolutely critical. So what did we achieve? We had a non-clinical space in 48 hours. We fully revamped it. We ran through multiple tests. We had 10 to 20 patients tested before opening, so that by the time we opened on a Monday, 300 patients a day could go through that space. So the principles that allow us to act quickly to follow what Michael Ryan's told us, where speed trumps perfection, we need to start with ensuring that the form fits the function. We need to be able to fail fast and fail often. And and we need to have a strategy to test. And finally, I'll leave you with this quote, and you could substitute a user interface to any healthcare policy or any healthcare design is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not that good. And with that, I'll conclude. Happy to, please hit me up on Twitter or send an email.